ทยากรท่านนี้นะคะท่านเป็นรองเลขาธิการอาเซียนฝ่ายประชาคมสังคมและวัฒนธรรมอาเซียนค่ะมาจากประเทศอินโดนีเซียนะคะวันนี้ท่านจะมาปาฐกถาพิเศษในเรื่องลำดับความสำคัญก่อนหลังการพัฒนาการศึกษาในมุมมองของอาเซียนอะไรคือปัจจัยและการมองอนาคตการเรียนรู้ในอีก5 ปีข้างหน้าจะเป็นอย่างไรOur next speaker is appointed Deputy Secretary General of ASEAN for Socio-Cultural Community to support ASEAN Secretary General in implementing the ASEAN Socio-Cultural Community Blueprint, as well as managing relations with ASEAN dialogue partners and the international community. Today, he's going to talk about education development priorities in worlds of ASEAN, what are the key elements, and how to envision learning to be like in the next 5 years. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mr. Wongthep Attagaivalwatee. Please welcome.
Kun Mr.Wongthep Aksorn, Chief Executive Officer, Aksorn Education Public Company Limited. Associate Professor Dr. Bansha Chalapirom, Dean Faculty of Education, Chulalongkorn University. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, Sawadee krab. Good morning. It gives me a great honor to be here with all of you this morning to participate in a very important conference entitled Thailand Educational Leaders Symposium 2015 with the theme Moving Forward to the Best Practices in Educational Institute Management Collaboration. I think that it is a very timely, the subject of this conference is very important, very opportune, very timely, that we are now started to discuss and exchange our views on this important subject. I am here in Bangkok, in fact just came back from the meeting of the ASEAN Summit in Kuala Lumpur over the weekend, and I could tell you that the issue of education figured prominently on the agenda of the leaders of ASEAN, as well as the leaders of the dialogue partner countries. We had very very interesting and dynamic exchange of discussion on this issue. So I thought that I will take this opportunity to be with all of you today, mainly those who are in the education sector, to share with you some of the ideas, or some of the developments within the framework of ASEAN, and in fact related international developments related to the issue of education, and to try to see where we stand and where we want to go from here. So I guess I would like to make this a very informal, engage in a conversation with you, with all of you. As you can tell, my voice is a little bit hoarse because, I had a very bad sore throat. So I hope I can get through this. Would be okay. Well, first of all, I would like to share with you what it means, at the global level when we're talking about the global commitment to education. See, here in Thailand, of course, the education sector is very active, and also the interaction with the ASEAN education sector. But let's perhaps take a look at a broader context. You may recall that many years ago here in Thailand, in Jomtien, in 1990, there was a global agreement discussion on the global education movement that started in Thailand, the international movement. That declaration was reaffirmed, reiterated again in Dakar, Senegal in 2000. In 2015, this year is very important in the sense that there was a major conference, World Education Conference, that was held in Incheon, Korea, in earlier this year, in which the meeting adopted the Incheon Declaration 2015. Now, what is the significance of that declaration? It is really built upon the earlier education, global movement for education for all, but it also, the declaration talks about the importance of inclusive and equitable quality education and the promotion of lifelong learning opportunities. I think that is quite a very powerful statement. It is not only a statement, but it's a political commitment by a number of member states and international organizations that participated. So I think when we're looking at the global level, I think that's where we can think about, okay, this is where we start in declaration. Now, why do we make the point so much about 2015? I have to say that this is a very exciting year because there are a lot of international developments taking place this year. And as you know, since 2000, the world adopted the Millennium Development Goals, which the cycle of which came to a close, is coming to a close in 2015. But already a few years back, the international community was already deliberating on what the post-2015 development agenda should look like. And this culminated in the work of the United Nations that adopted the Sustainable Development Goals in New York in September this year. The significance of this Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, which now will replace the MDGs, is that here is for the first time that we're talking about development goals that is much more integrated and includes many important aspects that has never been the case in the past. So when we talk about the education, promoting education for children, within the context of MDGs before, or this is pretty much in the usual economic development context with the kind of measurement of goals, target, and indicators that as we normally know within that context. Here, it is much more inclusive and integrative, in a sense that of all the 17 goals within the framework of SDGs, you find that not only we continue to talk about the eradication of poverty, reducing inequalities in society, but we also now have something that looks into, for example, the larger context of environment, sustainability, environmental sustainability, for example. Very interestingly, myself had been involved in this process of pushing through Goal 16. Now we have the goal that talks about peaceful and inclusive societies, access to justice for all, and accountable institutions. Now think about that for a minute. Before, as the goal, we think about development and economic sense. But here is a situation where the global community recognized that social injustices, disparity in the society, these type of things, justice-related issues also constitute development goals. we cannot achieve development without the rule of law. How do societies achieve the state of rule of law? That is a question. We think a lot about government efforts to talk about, promoting criminal justice institution reform. We talk about, discussing the law development or reform. These are some of the issues that we are very familiar here in Thailand as well. But at the very essence of all of the things that we are talking about, it is the people, human beings, the people that drive all these things. And if we are going to have any possibility of moving the agenda going forward, we need to engage the people. Especially now, this is where the education sector figures prominently. So you see, it's all these discussions at the global level all linked to the main development goals, education being one of the most important. So I mentioned about the latest development with regard to Incheon Declaration that was adopted in Korea in May of this year, mainly to highlight to you that there is a sense of complementarity between what is going on in the education sector at the global level, but also in the larger context of global development. The question that we ask ourselves is then, where do we stand against the backdrop of all this? And where do we go from here? So again, if I may talk about one of the very important goal of the SDG, Sustainable Development Goal, and that is the goal number 4 that talks about ensuring inclusive and equitable quality education and promoting lifelong learning opportunities. What do we mean by that? And what kind of targets and indicators that we are moving toward? I think this is the work that those who are in the field will have to try to come up with a very effective measures. But I think at the essence of all this is the questions of access. How do we ensure no child is left behind, no one is left behind, and access to education will be given to our children. That is something that is a very bold statement, okay? But I think that the important aspect to keep in mind is the question of access, equality. I give you another important aspect, also related to Goal 5, but somehow within the context of educational curriculum as well. I had a chance to have a little chat with Kun Tawan during the break, which he kindly suggested to me, which I thought was very interesting, is that one of the main things that that he would like to see, like a takeaway from this conference would be that how do we encourage educational institutes to really embrace the idea of change, in the way in which we collaborate with one another, within the institute and between the institute, not only on the subject matter in terms of content development, but the way in which we mainstream the subject matters. I think this is very important, in terms of educational management. But also, here is where I would like to, offer some thoughts or ideas that, over the years, I think that it has become clear that the question of gender equality is a very important one. Empowerment of women and all that. Here in Thailand, I think that we know we are one of the countries in the world that are very active in the promoting elimination violence against women. I use this as an example. So if we can somehow insinuate the idea of respect for women, respect for young boys, to respect and not committing violence against women in school. This is something that our colleagues in UN Women would know and very much supportive of. I use this as an example. And I think that there have been some kind of initiatives and projects that have been done in that context. I'm just trying to share with you the things that I know, being in the justice sector before joining ASEAN. So here, I think that we can make a difference in promoting the kind of idea and ideals, okay, in the educational curriculum and the way in which we teach our kids, okay? But this is something, such a transformative move that has to be understood and embraced by all people in the educational institute, okay? Basically, what we are talking about is the integrated approach to management of the education institute, collaborative and integrative in a sense. Okay, why? Because years from now, if we are to achieve any success, we'll come back and measure the kind of things we do. We could realize, we can see a lot of difference. How the new generation of kids, become more gender conscious and respectful. I use this as an example. Okay, but it's also important when we're talking about quality assurance of educational method, work, materials, and how we ensure that the teaching of subjects in school will contribute towards enhancing analytical and problem-solving skills of our children. I think this is something that people in the education sector need to keep in mind. And I forgot to mention from the outset, I mentioned Kun Tawan and Dr. Bancha, both the Faculty of Education of Juฬa and Aksorn company working closely together in organizing this impressive symposium. This in itself is a great example of what we mean by promoting public-private partnership. Okay, I think the idea of PPP, public-private partnership. Now here in the education sector, you see, I mean, we are part of the process of public-private partnership, and this is something that we need to see more of going forward. I was very impressed, looking at some of the materials and the exhibition outside. The kind of things that are very creative in terms of the online learning materials, use of social media, the ICT, for example, integrated in the teaching method. I think what we witnessed this morning is an indication, is a statement in itself that says, look, the importance of education for all, yes, at any time, anywhere. Accessible anytime, anywhere. So it is not only education in the school setting, but the recognition of all these materials with the idea of reaching the people, making it accessible to children everywhere. It really enhanced the whole philosophy of education in a sense that, that life is a learning process. Myself is a true believer in the idea of life as a learning process. We learn something new every day, okay? So I think this is something that we should inculcate in the minds of our kids. Now, I wanted to, with that as a backdrop, I want to turn now to the ASEAN region, because I think I was requested to speak, to say something about ASEAN. Now, I thought it was important to talk about the global development in the sense that we now have the global goals. Education is one of the goals. 2015, we're moving in the direction. The new global goals, we're talking about next 10, Agenda 2030. Now, ASEAN, within the framework of ASEAN, as you know, we also have our vision for the post-2015 vision, in which we're looking at the next 10 years. Okay, so this is slightly different from the SDG, so 5 years earlier. Okay. What is also interesting is that, as I mentioned to you, the dynamism, the regional dynamism is so exciting this year that not only we are at the juncture where we think about where we're going to go from here, 2015, but we ourselves are transforming into something that will change entirely, the idea of regional integration from the Association of Southeast Asian Nations over the past 40 some years to now the ASEAN community. Just this past Sunday in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, the Prime Minister of Malaysia, as a chair, announced the establishment of the ASEAN community, which will officially take place on 31st of December this year. Now, this is calling for a more closer and deeper integration at our level, in all areas. Interestingly, within the context of Thai society, I know this, I'm saying this from the experience of me being a Thai, because a few months ago, before I went to Jakarta to take up my new position, I think that the level of awareness about ASEAN within this society mainly related to the aspect of economic development, the economic activities, trade and investment. And we talk a lot about, not AC, ASEAN Community, we talk a lot about AEC, ASEAN Economic Community. So often that it has become, I think, something that is known, that when we're talking about the new regional integration, we're talking about AEC, as if it's the only thing. But that is not the whole picture, and I think this is something that I would like to take the opportunity to really, to speak with you, to emphasize to you that yes, this is not to say that economic community is not important. It is very important, very exciting. But if all of the countries within ASEAN region, including Thailand, only think about the economic aspect, leaving out, the idea of the strengthening the ASEAN political security community, what kind of society will we become? What kind of yes, opportunities, but also challenges, transnational challenges, and we know that there are so many, okay, ranging from human trafficking, transnational crime. Recently, terrorism is high on the agenda of all global leaders. What happened in Paris, Mali, Syria, Beirut, over the past few weeks. These are transnational challenges that, in fact, not only the concern of ASEAN region, but it's also the concern of the global community. Okay. Yet, that is also a very important aspect, and that is the ASEAN Socio-Cultural community. See, 3 equally important pillars of ASEAN as we move forward 2025. I'm saying this not because I am the new Deputy Secretary General for Socio-Cultural Department, but I can guarantee you, those people in the know will tell you this is a challenging one. Social and cultural aspects of ASEAN. Yes, economic community can be driven by interests of business and private sector to really encourage the conducive environment, collaborative environment, so that they will strengthen the trade regime. We're talking about now regional agreement or protocol on trade facilitation, for example, transport, linkage, all this stuff. So my question to you is the who. We know the why, okay? Why we integrate, because we want to become a stronger, main player of the global scene. But the who question is, who will do all this? Politics, strengthening, border management, economic, strengthening the logistical and transportational infrastructure development. Who will do all this? It's the people of ASEAN, the people of Thailand, and other countries of ASEAN. That's what we mean. So anytime we're speaking about ASEAN, just know that we are talking about the future, our future. It's very simple as that. Because that we are located in this region, our geographical reality mandates no other course. We are here. We're part of ASEAN, and ASEAN is our future. So what we're trying to do here, setting the agenda for 5 years, 10 years, laying a strong foundation to do this and that, we're not really doing it for ourselves. We're doing it for our children. We're setting all of this to make sure that we have a proper infrastructure, we have the proper platform for human resource development for the future of our children. I think we need to really understand this and embrace this and take this to heart, okay? And after all said and done, so the question that comes to mind, if I'm going to answer you, the question of who will do all this, who will be the main beneficiaries of all this? It's our children, it's our people, okay? So then we are talking about the importance of the people. So, I was just joking with my colleagues at the ASEAN Secretariat in Jakarta. Now everybody is so excited about the new trade collaboration called the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So I just came up with a new, my own TPP. I said, look, I don't deal with trade issues, but I have my own TPP too. And why is that? Sociocultural. I said, TPP for me is the people pillar, the people. So you see, as ASEAN is moving forward to enhance its connectivity, what do we mean? Connectivity in terms of physical infrastructure, but equally important is the connectivity between the peoples of ASEAN region. Okay, it's like this. I spent some years in Europe, in America, but mainly I would like to share with you some idea. I was living in Austria for some years. That the Europeans, they are very proud about their nationality, being proud of being a French person, or Italian, or German, or Austrian, for whatever. At the same time, the Europeans, they are proud to be called and to be known as European citizen. I think this is something that needs to be looked at very closely, and perhaps maybe we can learn something about this. The process of the European integration that started with the economic community, now over the years, or many years, evolved into something even deeper, and that is the European Union. The European Union, I think, is not only the question of the reduction of tariff and trade, but the sense of shared culture and values in which all these countries, all these people come together and feel proud. I think that if ASEAN is going to go anywhere in terms of being fully okay, let me get this straight, because this is the famous phrase that we always talk about within the framework of the new post-2015 vision, for ASEAN to be a politically cohesive, economically integrated, socially responsible, people-oriented and people-centered, and rule-based region, ASEAN region, rules-based, you see. So, spelled out like this. What we are talking about is we need to emphasize the importance of the people-centered development. And how do we put the people at the center of all this? Well, I have to tell you, first thing that comes to my mind is education. Yes, also the question of how do we, bring the people together through cultures. That is also very important. But I guess these are the questions that also intertwine with the question of education. Because we basically are talking about youth engagement, women empowerment, youth engagement. They are the key. Okay, so I think that I'm telling you about the different group of people really to highlight the fact that until and unless we really, get it together in terms of where do we go from here, is that we place emphasis on our people. Then I think that we will make a lot of difference. So as I mentioned to you, there are 3 pillars. My pillar, at least the pillar that I'm supposed to be responsible for, we have the new blueprint. Before it was the 2009 version, but now we have the latest version, which is the ASCC ASEAN Socio-Cultural Community Blueprint for 2025 now and starting next year. I want to emphasize that this is the vision, how we envision all this is that we would like to see ASEAN as a region that engages with people, engages and benefits. So not only, we engage with all different stakeholders in society in order for all of them to benefit. So that's the key. Empower peoples. That means from different groups, including the most vulnerable ones in the society, which is often, not on the agenda, but in the way that ASEAN sees it, we need to include all. Okay? Of course, then we are looking at also the question of how do we look at ASEAN as being sustainable. Now, my department also looks into the question of environmental sustainability. So, again, looking at the future of our children, environmental sustainability, where do we go from here? Climate change conference, the COP21 is going to happen in Paris in a few weeks. I think that we should all, express hope that we can get a deal that looks into a greater reduction of greenhouse gases, for to enable to have a very sustainable environment. So this is one of the aspects. Here within the ASEAN region, people have suffered, just recent months as a result of the haze pollution. It was like over a month, a couple of months, as a result of forest fires in Indonesia, for example. Now, what kind of thing that ASEAN can do to help, that is something not only when we say ASEAN, it's not only the ASEAN Secretary, in Jakarta, we're just a handful of people, but we also need to think about how ASEAN member states will come together, through collective action and think about responding to these kind of challenges. Why? Because it's affecting our people. Okay. Thank God we had some more rain in the recent weeks, to really address the issue. I think that this is something that I also want to talk about the concept of resilience. ASEAN places a lot of emphasis on resilience from the start from the establishment of ASEAN. Resilient ASEAN means that ASEAN will always bounce back from any challenges or crisis. But we must know that when it comes to the question of disaster, natural disaster, here is the region of the world that is most vulnerable and has had many experiences being affected by natural disasters more than any other regions in the world. I'm saying this because just a few weeks ago, last month, I was participating in the conference in Singapore, where we, for the first time, invited the Secretary General of ASEAN, the current one, His Excellency Le Long Min, and two former Secretaries General of ASEAN, Dr. Surin Pitsuwan, we all know and love and respect our Dr. Surin Pitsuwan, former SG from Thailand, but also previously Mr. Ong Keng Yong, the former SG from Singapore. For the three of them to share experience about how each of them had to deal and manage a crisis situation related to natural disaster. Cases in point, 2004, we had the tsunami disaster in Thailand, and of course, in this region, that was under King Yong. What kind of rapid humanitarian responses to such a crisis? How do we mobilize the people and experts in order to respond and to help the people in need? Okay. Then a few years afterward, when Dr. Surin was the Secretary General, we had, in fact, I was told, he told me that it was like only a few months after he took office, there was a major crisis in Myanmar, the cyclone Nargis. I think all of you could still remember, major crisis. Okay, how did we deal with the situation? What lessons did we learn? And also just during the current Secretary General Le Long Min, there was a situation of Haiyan typhoon in the Philippines. In fact, Philippines is quite vulnerable to this type of situation. So all these things is something that we're looking at. Yes, we're looking at the people pillar. We support them, we encourage them, we enhance their skills, but we also need to engage in order to make sure that they benefit. And when there are situations of crisis, humanitarian crisis, we want to make sure that they will be the beneficiaries of all this help. So this, by way of sharing with you, the idea related to ASEAN. Now, the last part of my talk, I would like to concentrate on the education aspect, as I was telling you, that the post-2015 vision of ASEAN also talks about a 5-year work plan on education, 2015 to 2020. And some of the features that I would like to share with you is really an effort to continue to promote a community that puts the people at the center, I mentioned to you before, but also enhance the awareness of ASEAN. Number 2, focus on sustainable development, and as I mentioned to you, sustainability and the resilience of ASEAN to respond to crisis. And also, number 3, emphasis on access to quality, inclusive education and the development of lifelong learning through a robust capacity building programs and provision of structural guidelines. I think these are the kind of things that you in the education sector are already working on. I think that it is just a matter of us trying to focus more on how do we think that we can improve ourselves better, what kind of training, capacity building for teachers, so that we will enhance the quality of teachers to teach children, in a better way. Now, just to answer the question that was posed for my session anyway, about key elements of ASEAN post-2015 vision on education and how teaching and learning is envisioned in ASEAN in the next 5 years. I want to share with you some points, okay? Point 1, emphasis on ASEAN awareness. I think that you all can agree with me, especially those teachers, colleagues out there who specialize in the teaching of history, that it is very important that we emphasize Southeast Asian history teaching and also indigenous knowledge about not only our people, but our friends, our neighbors, so that we inculcate the sense of ASEAN citizenry from the very young age, okay? Number 2, we should emphasize on quality and access to basic education for all, including the disabled, the disadvantaged, and other marginalized groups. And here, this is what I wanted to emphasize, that perhaps where the idea of public-private partnership, the example of how we get together here, could be an example of the way in which we move forward in the future direction, that we should invest more. Okay, private sector, businesses invest more in the future of our children, because doing so is strengthening the human resource that in turn will drive and propel the business and industry in the future. So think long term. I mentioned already number 3, the use of information technology, ICT, online materials. I think Aksorn is a great example of how I think even countries beyond ASEAN already use the model of Aksorn. So this is just an example. I want to also emphasize number 4 on the development of what we call TVET sector, the technical and vocational educational and training, education and training, TVET, so that not only the usual education curriculum, but also enhance the prospects of other group of people to also benefit from the vocational training. Number 5, we need to complement other sectors, efforts of other sectors in order to improve the education for sustainable development. Again, engaging and benefiting people. Number 6, strengthening the higher education sector through implementation of quality assurance. I already mentioned to you. I think that we are still working on harmonization of rules and regulations, so that we can think about how we could recognize the degree or certificates, how we enable the people in the education sector to be mobile, enhancing the connectivity, within the context of free movement of people, within the context of ASEAN community. Number 7, foster the role of higher education in the area of socio-economic development through university and industry partnership. I think also already touched upon very important aspect. Capacity building for teachers is very crucial. I think I would like to, I think that I have given you enough in terms of the way in which ASEAN sees this situation of education sector, both at the global level, at the level of ASEAN, where we go from here, some of the points highlighted. I think the final and closing remarks of my talk, I would really like to emphasize also that again, going back, echoing what I said before, that education for education's sake, meaning the curriculum or the subject matters, it is one thing, it's very important, and we need to continue to improve the quality, to enhance quality assurance. It is equally important for us in the education sector to always think about how we can make a difference by mainstreaming some of the important values in the teaching of our children, in the educational curriculum. Whether we're talking about, because if you look out there, the problem in the world that we have, it is really something that can be addressed through education. How about instilling the sense of the culture of peace, the culture of lawfulness, respecting the rules of law in the society, so that in the future we would not see the kind of thing that we have been witnessing over the past years. I think maybe that's the way, but just my thought, my take on this. How about promoting the culture of prevention? Prevention is better than cure. By promoting education, how do we prevent kids, youth, for being susceptible to being trafficked or engaged in some criminal activity, both as prevent them from being victims and as offenders. Now, and last but not least, and I think that all of us here, we know that how do we promote the sense of ethics, a culture of ethics as the means to prevent corruption in the future, instilled in the minds of young kids. So I think that taking all of those points that I have mentioned to you, I hope that I have done enough justice to the questions posed for my session. So with that, I would like to thank you all very much for your attention. Thank you.
ขอเสียงปรบมือให้กับคุณวงเทพ อัฏฐไกรวันวทีนะคะขอบคุณสำหรับเนื้อหาดีๆค่ะ Thank you Mr. Wongthep Attagaivalwatee for an excellent speech. Now I would like to call upon Mr. Mr.Wongthep Aksorn, the Chief Executive of Aksorn Education, to kindly present the token of appreciation to our speaker.